I'm Carole Taylor. On this edition of Journal, a question. Do you remember how you felt when Canada sent our first astronaut up into space? The pride, amazement? Did you ever wonder what it takes to be one of the chosen ones on this small team of would-be astronauts when Canada didn't even have a full space program? The year was 1984. The man was Marc Garneau, today's guest. His story is a remarkable tale of talent, guts, success, and very hard work in a number of professions. A captain in our Navy, Canada's first astronaut in space, president of the Canadian Space Agency, and finally a turn in politics as the Federal Minister of Transportation and then Foreign Affairs. And that's just a flyover of his career, pun intended. Marc has recently written a book on his adventures called A Most Extraordinary Ride, and indeed it has been. He describes himself as a restless individual, a somewhat challenging young man testing all of the rules. In his career, Marc Garneau, wearing different hats, had dinner with President Ronald Reagan and Prime Minister Mulroney just before his first space flight. He's traveled the world trying to better understand it, and in particular, the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific region. Then he served as our Minister of Foreign Affairs, which included the chaotic aftermath of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. One of Marc Garneau's last acts as a politician was to give a moving speech to the United Nations on Canada's behalf, saying in part, "Space offers the unique perspective of seeing beyond one's own national borders. In that sense," he stated, "the United Nations offers that same perspective." Back in a moment with the Honorable Marc Garneau. We're so pleased to have Marc Garneau join us for a conversation. We all watched you, of course, when you went into space. It was so exciting that a Canadian was actually up there. You were very successful in the Navy before, at the age of 34, you all of a sudden decided to answer an ad and apply to be an astronaut. What was intriguing you about space?
I think the sense of this would be an opportunity to be on this brand new frontier called space, and I thought that that was just so irresistible, so exciting that I couldn't help myself. And although I was very happy in the Navy, I thought, you know, this is an opportunity not to be missed, and it just seized me. And although I didn't think I was going to get chosen, because I knew that there were a lot of people who would apply, I decided just the same to try, and I was very fortunate.
And you talk in your book, which you've just released, about your book, which I have right here, from our bookcase. You talked about how hard it was, the training. Like, it really pressed you, even though you were already fit and in good shape.
Yes, there's no question about it. You want to be at your best, and so both physically, mentally, and of course, you'll have responsibilities when you're up there. On my first flight, I had 5 Canadian experiments that I was tasked with executing. So I wanted to make sure that I was really up to speed on them, because I was doing them on behalf of Canadian scientists back on the ground. And throughout all of that, because I knew I would be the first, I knew that there would be a lot of attention paid, particularly by Canadians who would be watching this. And so I felt the pressure from that point of view. I really wanted to perform well to get us off on the right footing so that future Canadian astronauts would have the opportunity to fly as well.
Any moments in that journey before you finally got belted in that you went, what am I doing?
Probably when I was sitting in the vehicle a couple hours before liftoff, I suddenly realized that I'd worked so hard to do all the training and many simulations and learned my experiments, and then suddenly I was in the vehicle and saying to myself, okay, this is no longer a practice. This is the real thing. This vehicle is going to light up in 2.5 hours, and we're going into space. And I think it's a little bit natural to fear a little bit, to have a few butterflies in your stomach, because when they light up this vehicle, there's 7 million pounds of thrust, those big solid rockets.
And you're sitting on top of it.
And you're sitting on top of it, and you, of course, know that it's a complicated piece of technology and all sorts of things can go wrong, as we've tragically seen. And so you're a little bit nervous about it, but you're also the other sort of side of the tug of war is that you're so excited about the fact that you're going to do something that I was the 150th person to go into space. I just felt it was such a privilege, and I was just so excited about what I was going to feel when I got up there. So I was going to stay on board.
So when you had your first look down at planet Earth, and you were fortunately flying over Canada,
yes,
did it change you?
It did. It did. Not right away the moment I first saw Earth, but it does over time. And I had the privilege of doing 3 flights. And I think that today I'm more concerned about what I call the existential problems that face humanity, and that is the effects of climate change. We are changing our environment because of our human presence down here. We're losing our biodiversity on the planet. We are often in conflict and sometimes in very tense situations amongst nations. And yet, when you look down at this planet, that you go around 16 times a day and you see all the countries, and there are 8 billion of us inhabiting this planet, and you see it against the blackness of space, it's driven home to you that this is our only home, that there is no plan B, there is no option B, and that we must find a way to take care of the planet, and we must find a way to get along with each other. And that is because of that unique perspective of being up there, because, you know, when we're down on Earth, our horizon is, 5 kilometers around us, and it's not that we don't think about world problems, but it strikes you when you're up there and you're looking down at the planet. And so I think to this day, I'm not saying I'm not concerned about local issues, but I'm more concerned about global issues.
Look down at Earth and wonder why we're always fighting each other.
Absolutely. At any one time on this planet, there are dozens of conflicts, and some of them very serious.
Was it a spiritual connection for you?
There is an element of that for some people. In my particular case, I mentioned in the book that, you know, when I was sitting on the pad towards the end, that 2.5 hour period, I prayed that there was a God. As opposed to I prayed that God was looking over me. So it tells you that I still have I still have challenges with my own faith about whether God exists. And I mentioned in the book an American astronaut who said to me, I did the same thing, and when I got to space, I knew there was a God. I'm not sure I'm quite there, but I certainly, during the time I was up there, because you're in this unique place and you see the space all around you, you do think about those very big questions about how did this all come about? Was there a creator? And that certainly went through my mind in a way that perhaps you don't think about it as much when you're down on Earth, or perhaps on certain nights when you're looking up at the stars you may think about it, but you thought about it there all the time because it just sort of naturally came to you.
And so you're still on that journey.
I'm still on that journey. Sometimes I'm more certain than other times, but I sometimes wonder why we seem to be left to our own devices here, and we don't seem to be getting wiser.
That's true. So when you're up in space, for those of us who've never experienced the loss of gravity, what's the most challenging thing to do? Is it sleeping or eating or?
Some people have trouble sleeping up there because we're all very idiosyncratic and very particular about how we sleep. And some people like lots of weight on them, blankets, duvets. People are very fussy about the kind of pillow they have behind their head and the temperature. And some people like to sleep with a leg outside the covers. And up there, you just get in a bag and you Velcro yourself to anything, you know, or tether yourself. It can be on the ceiling, it can be on the floor, it can be anywhere. And you're floating inside the bag. And so for some people, it's a strange feeling. And they're not that, it takes them a while to get used to it. I slept very well, I have to say. And I even one night untethered myself and just floated
into somebody else's bed.
Almost. As a matter of fact, because you do move around a little bit, and I ended up almost face to face with somebody and opened my eyes because I was experiencing a little backache. You do that; it happens to some of the astronauts because your spine stretches. And I thought, oh my goodness, I hope he doesn't open his eyes now because I'm only about 8 inches from his face. I just sort of put my hand behind him on the wall and pushed myself away. He didn't wake up, so I was okay.
What about eating? How does that work?
So eating is, of course, very different from on Earth. You can't just sort of, you know, put 2 pieces of bread on the table and make a sandwich. Everything floats. So everything comes in containers, and most of it is dehydrated. You add water. You have it's a sort of a plastic cover, and you have a syringe that you inject water in, and then we have a little oven where you can warm it up. And so it's dehydrated food, which a lot of people know about. But the thing is, eating it, you have to be a little bit careful. So you make a little cut in the plastic and then you insert your spoon. But if you jiggle it around too much, the food goes all over the place and you know, you're responsible for cleaning up your own mess.
We have a chance to continue this conversation in just a minute. We're going to take a short break, then we'll be back. Back with Marc Garneau. I see you as a risk taker. I don't know how you see yourself, but you were a risk taker in going and being our first astronaut in space. And then you decide to go into the risky business of politics.
Yes, and some people think that I displayed very bad judgment in doing that, particularly after the federal liberals had been in power for 12 years, and there was evident fatigue in the country with the Liberals, Chrétien, Martin. But my timing wasn't great from that point of view. But what attracted me to go into politics was that at the time I was president of the Canadian Space Agency. And whilst I could recommend to the government how they should, where they should go with the space program, it was they who made the decisions. And I thought it would be interesting to be on the other side of the table. Even though I was 56 at the time, I thought, well, if I don't try it now, it'll be too late. And so, for better or for worse, I jumped into it.
Do you feel you're a risk taker?
I am a risk taker, but I think of myself as taking informed risks, as opposed to, perhaps not when I was a teenager. I did some stupid things back then. But as an adult, yes. And I think that I've met too many people who've reached the end of their careers and have said, you know, the old I coulda, shoulda, woulda, and they feel that they have certain regrets about not trying out certain things in their life because they decided to play it safe. And we only have one life. And I don't mean to encourage people to be reckless, but I think that some things in life do carry risk. Risk, in some cases of life, but in many cases of simply failure. You know, it didn't work out. And that's not the end of the world. Failure is something that we all experience, and we can recover from it. But if we don't try and play it safe all the time, I think there may be a sense of not having quite done everything we could to live the full life that we really would have liked to have lived.
And wouldn't that be a sad ending if that's how you felt?
Yeah, and so I'm very fortunate. I don't feel that way. I feel like now I'm just happy to be, you know, live quietly, and I don't have any more big mountains to climb. But it was fun. Your
point about the role of government I relate to, because being a journalist most of my life, you're often talking to people or making suggestions or looking at issues, and this is what should be done. So you're talking on that side. But in the end, it's only people in government who can actually make the changes. Yes. But I remember when I decided to do a bit of politics, I don't know if this happened to you, but all my friends said, "Are you crazy? Like, are you crazy? Politics doesn't have the best rep these days."
No, you're 100% right. And it is really not for everyone. And I had to, and I often say, when I was an astronaut, everybody liked me. When I jumped into the political arena, people felt, and they have the right to feel that way, that they could criticize either what my party or what I believed in, or unfortunately, sometimes it got personal, which I think is unfortunate. You can disagree with a party's platform or their values, but unless a politician behaves really, really badly, you shouldn't get personal if it's simply about their political convictions. So, but you have to grow a bit of a thick skin to be in politics. Otherwise, it's not a pleasant profession at all.
I've never seen it so nasty.
I think you're right. In my last speech in the House of Commons on the 8th of March 2023, because I was given the opportunity on my way out the door to speak for 10 minutes. And I asked all of my colleagues in the House on both sides to find their better angels and to find a way to be civilized about the discourse. And by all means, disagree and put some humor into it if you can, but let's keep it civilized. And it seems like it's a lesson that has to be relearned every week because they're perfectly capable of doing it. We are all perfectly capable of behaving properly. But something happens and it becomes very, very nasty. And Canadians are watching. And it's just so disappointing.
Well, you were in two major portfolios, transportation and then foreign affairs. So let's pull the curtain back for people who want to know what life is like in politics. Mm-hmm. In a major portfolio, would you meet with the Prime Minister every week?
No, except in cabinet. Not one-on-one, but in cabinet, where there would be, 30 or 35 of us around the table, and we would go over once a week the important issues, whether it was upcoming legislation, whether it was dealing with a crisis or what have you. And we had our share during the time that I was there. But if you're talking about one-on-one conversations, although the Prime Minister said my door is always open, in practice it was not the case. And first of all, I don't feel that I should bother the Prime Minister unless it's really, really important. And I only did that on 2 occasions during my 5 years at Transport. I feel I'm supposed to be a big boy and take care of things without bothering the Prime Minister, whose time is very, very precious. But I was never close to him, and I never felt that I could just drop in and have a chat with him. And he never called me and said, Mark, I'd like to know what you think about this. So it was never one-on-one. It was always through cabinet. And, it's not required in order to do your job. It's only trust that's required to do your job. You don't have to be buddy-buddies with the Prime Minister.
But the same story has been told by many former cabinet ministers, whether it's Jane Philpott or Jody or Morneau, that they just didn't have a one-to-one relationship with this Prime Minister.
Yes, and that is true. And as you point out, I'm not the only one to have pointed this out. And that is largely because the Prime Minister allowed the PMO, the people around him, the Prime Minister's office, to act as a barrier for him. And so everything was funneled through there, unless you happened to be a personal close friend of the Prime Minister. I was not. I mean, I'm 23 years older than him. We're different people. But I always had concerns that if I wanted to convey something to the Prime Minister, I would go through my contact in the Prime Minister's office. But in hindsight, I'm never sure what got through to the Prime Minister. And that's preoccupying because I am accountable to the Prime Minister through the mandate letter he gives me. So that, I think, is regrettable. And Justin Trudeau said he wouldn't that he would dismantle that sort of barrier because Harper had that kind of a fortress around himself, but he didn't do it. So it's unfortunate.
I was so disappointed when you were not named to the new cabinet after the last election you ran in.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a surprise to you?
Yes, it was a gut punch, no question about it, because I had run again, even though I had told my family that I wasn't going to run again. But because he had appointed me to Foreign Affairs 7 months before the election in 2021, there were so many things I wanted to do at Foreign Affairs because I'd had the chance to sink my teeth into it. And he didn't say to me before the election, Mark, if you're re-elected, I have to tell you, you won't be in the cabinet. He didn't tell me that, so I thought that I would be able to continue my job. And so, yes, it came as a total surprise to me when he removed me from cabinet. And I was very disappointed. But the truth is that he doesn't have to. He chooses his cabinet and he dismisses his cabinet. And he doesn't have to explain why he puts you in cabinet or why he removes you from cabinet. And so to this day, I don't know why he made that decision, but it is what it is. And I don't leave politics after 14 and a half years with any bitterness. I felt that those 14 and a half years were very satisfying, and I was able to do some good things while I was there.
Well, people just have to read your book. A most extraordinary ride. Like, it is jam-packed with all the details of the things you've accomplished and in your life. How long did it take you to write?
About a year.
And was that a good experience?
It was. It was a learning experience, and I had to do my research carefully because, believe it or not, as time goes by, you don't remember things quite as well as you thought you did. And so, fortunately, I had some good proofreaders.
Well, thank you for dropping by today.
Thank you, Carole.
The Honorable Marc Garneau. Marc Garneau is an accomplished gentleman, willing to put himself forward in the name of public service. After his first space flight, one of 3, Marc traveled the country talking to students, youngsters, professionals, in fact, anyone who would listen, about the mystery and the glory of space. We are fortunate to have good people in Canada wanting to give back to their country. Let me know your thoughts on YouTube. Till next time, I'm Carole Taylor.